All right, guys, promotions in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, man, they're a funny thing. They're so weird, and so many places do it so differently. What's the right way? What's the wrong way? I'm going to give you my take on all this. My name is Bill Jones. I'm the head instructor of top-level martial arts in beautiful downtown Cuyahoga Falls. I'm a black belt under Master Pedro Sauer. You're watching Professor's Corner. All right, so promotions in Jiu-Jitsu. Man, this is a weird topic, and it gets discussed probably once every other year or so that comes up. So I thought, well, I'll give you my take on it. I know Firas Zahabi was just on Joe Rogan Experience talking about it. If you haven't seen that, definitely go check it out. He brings up some great points. And of course, he's a killer in and of itself. So, him and Joe both, for that matter. And Joe has done more for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in my mind, than almost anybody since Hoist Gracie. And, he talks about it. He suggests it to people and everything. So nothing but mad respect for him and anybody he brings on that podcast. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about specifically was Firas talks about the promotion process of jiu-jitsu and kind of like how different schools do it differently and his beliefs on it and is it being watered down. So full disclosure, let's explain how we do it at my school and why. I am under Pedro Sauer. Pedro Sauer, the association, does a white belt with 4 stripes, and then you earn a blue bar, and you get 4 stripes on the blue bar, and then you're ready to test for blue belt. And it is a test, and I'll explain all that in a minute. So it's kind of weird. I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of it, but Professor has asked us to do it. He feels that having that many stripes and stuff is motivating to new people coming in, and I do believe that there is some truth to that. It's how he's always done it at all of his schools, and so I do it too. It's that simple. So we do testing as well. So there's a curriculum and a standard that people are expected to understand and know. And, it's just like any body of learning. For example, if I go take a class in physics, it's not expected that I only know the things on the test, but it is expected that at a minimum I know the things on the test. And that's what testing is. It's just adherence to a standard, and it's a quality assurance level, right? So it makes it so that if people, let's say you get a guy who's really good at arm bars, but he doesn't know anything about sweeping, it kind of makes sure that these people don't become, it's okay to be a specialist, of course, but that they don't just know that kind of stuff. And that's the idea behind having a curriculum. Let's go into specifics. So what is a belt? I mean, a belt is just a generalized representation of skill, right? It's if you're a blue belt, just about anywhere you're going to have about this level of skill. If you're a purple belt, you're going to be advanced. If you're a brown belt or a black belt, you're going to be a bad motherfucker. That's really what it comes down to. And sorry about my language, but it's not a kids podcast, so that's what it's really coming down to, is that it's a generalized representation of skill. Now, it's a generalized representation of skill as prescribed by whatever school or association you're under. So how do you get from one belt to another? Different schools have different ways to do it. I've seen schools where it's like you get a stripe and then maybe you'll test like the next week. The stripes literally are just kind of like an attaboy. Like, hey, you did really good at that tournament the other day. Here's a stripe on your belt. Kind of like people get, you see football players with the stickers on their helmets for like tackles and stuff. That's kind of how a lot of places do the stripes. They have nothing to do really with the rank. It's just more of a pat on the back. Other places adhere very strictly to the stripes. I can tell you that in my academy and in our association, we adhere strictly to the stripes. And I would say for anybody who adheres strictly to that stripe system, there's also a minimum requirement. Now, I'm using the word minimum requirement very importantly here. I believe that when people see things, they see, for example, if you looked at my material, my app, that kind of stuff, it talks about the requirements for a stripe on a white belt. It's a minimum. Keep in mind now we have 10 stripes essentially, right? The 4 on one side, 4 on the other, the blue bar, and then the eventual promotion to blue belt. So it's a minimum of 10 classes for a stripe and 30 days of training. So that is at minimum 1 month plus 10 classes. And if you don't get 10 classes in a month, you're just not really training. So that is a minimum requirement. There are times that I look at the promotion list and I say, okay, well, so-and-so has, their classes, but man, I never see them roll. So I'm going to hold them back for a little longer. Tell them I want to see them roll. I want to see them do this stuff. That is 100%, as the instructor, my prerogative. So it is not like someone comes in, and I've had to explain that to people, that they're like, oh, I've got my 10 classes, and I'm like, great job. I want to see you roll more. And they're like, oh, but, and it's like, well, that's what's going to be required for you to get that stripe or that next step. If I think people are doing fine, then I'll promote them, at those time frames. But it's definitely not a guarantee at all. In fact, I have people who have been at belts for very long periods of time, either because they haven't been training enough, or and I don't count teaching duties as training. So I have some guys who have been teaching, and they would teach, and then they'd just go home after teaching, and they would say, hey man, what are you looking for me to get promoted? And I'm like, well, you've got to train as well. I expect you to train. And they go ahead and they start training as well. So that's a real important distinction, I think, from what Firas Zahabi was saying. And I apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. I've never met the man, so I think that's how it's pronounced. And if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. And don't forget, guys, we have the gi giveaway. So every month I'm giving away a gi. All you have to do is comment on our videos and be a subscriber, and you are entered in the gi giveaway. So we already had one winner for that, so I'm excited to give away another one. All right, so back to the watering down of jiu-jitsu. So I think a lot of people see those standards and read about them and make assumptions that aren't true, or, and it's quite possible, they've dealt with people who are adhering to those standards a little too strictly and thinking of them as like the actual, like, 10 classes, you get a stripe. 10 classes, you get a stripe. 10 classes, you get a stripe. Here's your blue belt. Like, it should never be that way. That's not how it's supposed to be. And it's not that way in any educational endeavor, right? In any educational endeavor, there's usually a minimum requirement of what they call KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And you have to develop a base knowledge. You're tested on that base of knowledge. You have to develop skills that go along with that base knowledge, the wisdom, and you have to have the ability to use it. So those three things are existing in jiu-jitsu as well. With that said, we also do testing. Again, testing is just to make sure that somebody knows the entire curriculum. And it's more important in my mind at lower levels. I want to make sure that my white belts going to blue belts and blue belts going to purple belts are very familiar with the curriculum and the standards of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that we do. And then I would say that because we're part of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family, we also have a little bit of a traditional component, a little bit more than maybe some other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools. And that would be the master text from Grandmaster Helio Gracie. Everybody in my association is expected to be able to perform and understand and use those techniques. And if you look at that book, like, just looking at it, you think, man, this looks really karate-ish. I don't mean that as a dig on karate, but it looks very, like, compliant. Like, I feel like I'm not in focus. It looks super compliant, and I think it is at first, but I mean, what move isn't when you first learn it? But you are expected to try to be doing those things while rolling as well. Like, you stand up. It's a lot of stand-up stuff. If someone bear hugs you, do you know how to get out? Now, there's more than one way that's listed in there to get out. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. My battery's dying. We're back. All right, so we were talking about the standards and the reason for testing. And I would also say that as you grow as a school, if I have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school and it's got 50 people, it's very easy for me to keep track of who's who and make sure that I'm training with everybody. That sounds like well, of course the head professor should know who's who, and who's training with everybody. I have almost 300 members, and I can tell you that there's members who come on days that I'm not here. I don't teach on every day because I'm a human being and I have a family and I don't have to teach every day. I have a staff and a team who helps me with that, and they teach and they train people. And so I need to make sure that these people are up to standard, even though they've been training under my team. So if we go to a testing, and let's say our next test is in January, I only do like one, maybe two a year, and I look through the list of people who are supposed to test. that I think are supposed to test, and then I give that list to my instructors and I say, hey, am I missing anybody? And then they give me input on that. And from there, we then say, okay, I watch them test, I watch what my expectations are, and I can look at my instructors and say, hey guys, for some reason everybody sucked at arm bars. Let's get our arm bars. Let's really focus on that. I can retrain my staff, and I can make sure that everybody's teaching things that way that I feel that they should be taught. So that's another important part and component that people don't understand, and that's about running a business in general, and that is quality standards, quality assurance. You have to make sure that people are meeting the standard of quality that you expect. So while I do have a certain love, and here's a story about how I got the first 4 stripes on my white belt. My instructor was Tony Rinaldi. He's out in Youngstown, Ohio. He's hilarious. He's one of the funniest guys and kindest guys you'll ever meet. But he has a way about him. And he hadn't been with the Pedro Sauer Association long. In fact, he joined it after I started. So I was already black belt in Aikido Jiu-Jitsu and karate and kung fu. I met Tony. I said, I want to wear a white belt now. So I put on a white belt. And a little over a year later, Pedro Sauer was coming into town. And Tony looks at me and he goes, hey. He always had this chew in his mouth. He goes, hey. That's how I talk. Hey. Put some damn stripes on your belt. Pedro likes to see that. You're testing next week. That's how I got stripes on my belt and how I found out I was testing. And that's pretty standard, I think, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, except the only difference would be someone would be like, hey, there's a blue belt. Put that on. Right? There's like, you're a blue belt now. So while I understand the hesitancy for a lot of places to test, the more people you're working with, the more I believe testing is required, and a good thing. Now, what do I think about online only training? I don't think you should be tested on that. I think that's something that's an entirely different conversation. I don't think that is jiu-jitsu training. That's something else. So I understand. Let's not confuse those two issues, okay? So yeah, we have testing. I can say that I believe in charging for tests, but only if they're happening outside of normal time frames. So what I mean by that is if I was having a test and it was on a regular day of the week, so let's say a Tuesday, and I was like, okay guys, test is going to be on Tuesday, everybody show up, we'll go through the test and then be done, I would not charge for that test. We're already going to be there. I don't have to, there's no extra expense for me, there's nothing. The problem with that becomes that, again, as you grow as a school, you get bigger, you have to have special events for testing. And for example, our test in January is going to be on a Sunday. That's normally my manager's day off. That's normally my assistant manager's day off. Those people are going to be expected to be there, and I will pay them for their time. And part of that is that it needs to be compensated for. So at present, I only charge for kids testing. I haven't charged for adult testing yet, but it's something that I can understand why people do. If you've never run a business and you don't understand that payroll is one of the largest expenses you have, especially payroll when it's going to maybe be causing overtime and stuff, then you have no business talking about whether or not someone should charge for something. That's my opinion on it, because payroll is the largest expense of any business, and as a person who employs 3 full-time employees, all instructors, and 4 other part-time employees, I can talk about it as a small business and tell you that it's very expensive. It's more than just their hourly wages, it's more than just their salary, there's also workers' comp and insurances and other things that you have to buy into to have employees. So that's an expense that needs to be compensated for, and I don't, normal dues, normal tuition is never going to cover that. It's never going to cover that. And I haven't seen any events ever where it's included. I remember when I played football in high school, you had to pay $50 to go to the banquet. When you do, almost anything, there's secondary expenses to all of them. Dance, gymnastics, all of these have secondary expenses. And I think that testing it's something you do, 3 times? You test for blue, purple, brown, black. 4 times. 4 minor expenses. Now, if you're saying, oh, it's going to be $300 for your black belt test, Why is it any different than the others? Like that I don't get. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's raking people over the coals just to make them jump through hoops to get a black belt. Yeah, I don't believe in that. I think a test is a test is a test. You're there, you're watching it. What's the difference? So I don't believe in charging differently for different levels, but I do believe that the people who are charging for tests are more than allowed to do so, and calling someone a McDojo because they're doing it is really not fair. So where does that leave us? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think a lot of people misunderstand the minimum time frames that they see. Now, I can't speak for any other association. I'm speaking specifically for the Pedro Sauer Association when I say that, in my school. They're minimum time frames. They're not a guaranteed promotion. I don't think there's a problem with testing or charging for tests. And the main reason is I run a business, I have a lot of members, and I've seen what that costs. So I get why it's done. Now, with that said, too, like, I think that if you're having a big event, or, you're bringing in, some of these, I've seen some martial arts schools, they do like this big event, they rent out a hall, they do all this kind of stuff for the testing. Like, they're making it an extravagant event. I can understand, again, why they might charge more. I don't think that's always necessary, but there's people who like that. They want that added value, and so that's what they do. So anyway, that's my take on it. I want to know what you think, though. I know some people are vehemently against testing. I don't understand why, but your opinion is your opinion. You're more than welcome to it, and I want to hear what you have to say about it. By the way, 5 Tiny Tips is coming next, talking about the Darce choke. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget, comment, like, subscribe, get entered in that gi contest. I'll talk to you later. Alright guys, I'm back with 5 tiny details on finishing the Darce choke. Dustin, I'm just going to have you lay on your side. Your side, please. Facing me. So I can Darce choke you. Alright, so I want to show you something right now, and it's a thing that I see that's really common. So if I just take your arm here, and I go like this, don't move, just stay. Like, people are like, I can't reach the choke. There's 2 main problems that are going on right here that I'm going to fix for you, and this will probably fix 90% of your Darce chokes. The first problem is that his shoulders, like if you make good posture here, the top shoulder right now is behind the forward or the bottom shoulder. You need that forward. Okay? And a lot of times this starts off by this guy trying to turn in. Just use your chin and pull him. Okay, now his shoulder is forward of his bottom shoulder. That's going to help. The second thing is called the illusion of depth. And by the way, I get all these details from on the Darce choke from my friend David Porter. If you haven't bought his DVD, Bringing Back the Bravo, I highly recommend it. He's hit more Darces in competition than almost anybody else. And like, a lot of people are here trying to get deep, and if you notice, it looks like I'm deep. See, you can see that I'm deep, but if I kind of pin everything down and just, I've got like 8 more inches I can go in, giggity. So pretend that you're like going into like, like when you were a kid and you saw like the vending machines with like the candy bars and stuff, and you try to like stick your arm way up in there. Same thing, rotate and get in. Look how much deeper I am. I'm able to flick his ear with my thumb. And guys, I do not have long arms, okay? But that's how much deeper I am. So detail 3 is that I'm going to open my hand to be ready to catch my bicep. I see a lot of people like come in here and like try to pull the head. If you pull the head in, you're actually putting it in the way of the choke, okay? So I don't pull the head in, I lift it up. So I've come in, boom, I'm deep. Watch how much deeper I can get by taking his ear to his shoulder, as opposed to pulling his chin toward his chest. Up, deep, throw my hand to my bicep to my hand, and I drop down at about a 45-degree angle to him. Stay right there. Notice that I'm kind of looking this way on him, as opposed to being truly perpendicular. That's another key that's going to help get you a lot of depth. So we're in. And now from here, the last detail, I'm not a fan of sprawling the legs. I know a lot of you want to, but this really isn't the best position to finish it from. It's actually pretty easy for him to defend from here because my lock is underneath his weight. So I want to put my lock on the top. Okay, a bunch of ways to do that. My favorite is to open my leg, lay to my side, and now watch, I just walk toward him. It rolls him, and now I can get his legs and I can just finish with my hips.
You are, but I wasn't.
So it's not the arms doing the squeezing at all. The arms simply maintain, and then my hips drive in to squeeze. That brings everything very tight. Let's do it again.
Yeah, I was trying to either see that.
The one last detail I will talk about, let's turn for the camera. One last detail I will talk about, sometimes you're so deep when you do this that you start, your opponent's gonna say, hey, I'm just feeling it on the side of my neck. You'll need to rewind. So, if I'm in so deep right now, I can tell you that Dustin, if I squeeze right now, it's just pain on his neck. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get this arm out of the way so you can see, but it would all stay here. I'm just going to rewind a little bit to get this little part of my forearm right on the carotid, right here. You want it here, not on the big muscle of the neck. So one more time, we're in, come through. Here, I'm tight, I even rewound a little bit. Leg, walk into him, find his leg, and now my hips do the work. Thanks, Dustin. And that's at least 5 tiny details, guys. I hope that helps. Talk to you later.